Celeste, my sister, threw the photo at my chest before I even had the chance to take my coat off. It hit harder than a frame that light should have. Maybe it was the timing. 8:47 in the evening on Christmas night. Maybe it was the way the room went silent, as if everyone had agreed this was the moment Celeste finally said out loud what she had been practicing for years. I heard the frame crack when it hit the floor. I heard someone gasp. I did not lean down to pick it up. My hands stayed perfectly still at my sides. That surprised me. "Cheap, worthless trash," she said, loud enough for the couples near the staircase to hear. "Alina, you can keep it." A few heads turned away, suddenly fascinated by the charcuterie board. Someone cleared his throat. The string lights above the fireplace buzzed. A cinnamon candle flickered like it wanted to leave the room too. I just stood there, looking at a photograph of my own family, lying face down on hardwood that probably cost more than my first car. 15 years. That was how long it had been since that picture was taken. My mom had both arms around us. My dad was behind the camera. My hair was shorter. Celeste was still human. I did not argue. I did not ask why. I only said one sentence, steady as a line drawn with a ruler. "From now on, you are on your own." I walked out before she could answer, but I heard it anyway. That little laugh she had perfected. A sharp, breathy thing. A laugh that said she believed she had already won. If you have ever been shoved out of your own family without a single push, you know the kind of cold that settles in your bones. It is not dramatic. It is not cinematic. It is just final. And if you are listening to this right now thinking you would never let that happen to you, trust me. None of us think it will happen until the moment it does. Outside the house, the air smelled like cedar and gasoline. Westlake Hills at Christmas always looks like a holiday commercial. Perfect lawns, perfect lights, perfect people pretending they did not just watch a woman erase her sister in under 10 seconds. My breath came out in slow clouds. I counted them. 4, then 5, then 6. Anything to delay getting into my car. Funny thing, I should have felt embarrassed, humiliated, angry. Instead, something calm slid into place. Like a puzzle piece I had forgotten about. Something cold and very clear. I realized I had just watched Celeste make the biggest mistake of her life. She just did not know it yet. Tonight felt fake in a different way. Too polished, too practiced. Even her cruelty came with choreography. The dress, the hair, the timing. She knew exactly when to humiliate me. Right when the music softened. Right when all eyes were drifting toward the tree. No one tosses a gift with that kind of precision unless they planned every beat of it. If you are wondering what the gift was, it wasn't anything expensive. It wasn't jewelry or some luxury brand she could post online. It was a book. A simple, linen-bound notebook I had turned into a photo book over the course of 2 months. Inside, I pasted old family pictures I had collected from my dad's boxes in Charlotte, the ones Celeste never bothered to keep. I added dates in the corners, little handwritten notes Mom used to write on the back of photos, even a few clippings from birthday cards she saved when we were kids. When the printing shop finished binding it, the man behind the counter flipped through it and said it reminded him of a home where people still talk to each other. I almost laughed at that. The irony was unreal. In that picture, Mom had this soft smile. The kind she used when she was thinking something she would never actually say out loud. She loved both of us. That much I never doubted. And Celeste looked at the camera like she was already imagining where this photo would be displayed. She did not know then that she would one day remove every trace of me from every wall in her house. I started the engine. The dashboard glowed a soft blue. I saw my reflection in the window and barely recognized the expression on my face. Not a shock. Not sadness. More like recognition. This was not the first time someone in that house had made it clear I was optional. It was just the first time it was done without excuses. Driving down her street, I passed house after house wrapped in lights. Families inside laughing over leftovers. Someone burning a pie. Kids arguing about who cheated in a board game. Normal sounds, real noises. And there I was, a woman in her early 30s, sitting alone in a hybrid with heated seats that suddenly felt too warm, holding the knowledge that my own sister had looked at my attempt to preserve our history and decided it was trash. By the time I reached the bottom of the hill, a memory surfaced. An old one. I was maybe 10. Celeste was 15. Mom had bought matching sweaters for a Christmas card photo. Celeste hated hers. She said it made her look wide. Mom begged her to wear it for just 5 minutes. Celeste refused. She said she would not be in a picture where she did not look perfect. My dad snapped the photo anyway. Celeste did not speak to any of us for 2 days. Looking back, that should have been a billboard-sized red flag. I turned onto the main road, heading toward the bridge into downtown Austin. Traffic was light. The radio played some late-night jazz and I let it run. I needed the noise. But the silence underneath it kept pulling me back to that living room. The garland wound too tightly around the staircase. The artificial pine scent. The way her friends looked at me, then at her, then at the floor. People know when something cruel has happened. They just do not want to be the one to name it. Have you ever noticed how families can rewrite the truth if they rehearse it enough times? Celeste was good at it. She curated everything. The photos on her Instagram, the stories she told at school fundraisers, the way she always introduced me as someone who lived in Austin, as if Austin were some kind of mysterious, distant place rather than 15 minutes from her own front door. I was never Ellie, her sister. I was Ellie, who works in tech. Ellie, who travels too much. Ellie, who is independent in a way that made her uncomfortable. The real irony is that the picture she threw away was the only proof we ever had existed as a family without all the performance, and she tossed it like it was nothing. Halfway across the bridge, I felt something shift in me. Not anger, something sharper. Something like a clean line being drawn. People like Celeste only understand boundaries when they hit the wall face first. Tonight she hit one, and thought she had pushed me through it. She had no idea I had finally stopped trying to fit inside her frame. When I pulled into my apartment complex, I sat in the car for another minute. The lights from the city bounced across the river and into the lot. I listened to the engine ticking as it cooled. My hands still were not shaking. I suppose that was the moment I understood. This was not a rupture. It was a release. A clean break disguised as a holiday disaster. Inside my place, the quiet felt heavier than usual. I set my keys on the counter and poured myself a glass of water, not wine. My head needed to stay clear. I walked to the small closet where I kept my winter coat and saw an old box on the book shelf. A memory box. Ticket stubs. A few letters from Mom. A ribbon from a birthday long ago. I thought about the photo Celeste had thrown and wondered how many other pieces our family she had already erased over the years. I sat on the floor with the box open in front of me. The apartment hummed with the sound of the heater. Outside, a dog barked twice. Life is going on as usual. My life was about to go on too, just without the weight I had carried for decades. I closed the box, stood up slowly, and looked at the empty spot on the wall where a photo frame could hang. Not tonight, but someday. A different picture, maybe. One that did not lie. That night, before I turned off the light, I said the sentence again under my breath. From now on, you are on your own. It did not sound like revenge. Not yet. It sounded like the truth was finally catching up. And if I had known then how quickly everything would unravel for her, I might have stayed a little longer in that doorway, just to see the first crack appear. But that part of the story comes later. From now on, you are on your own. I said it once in that dark apartment, and the words just hovered there, thin and sharp, like they were waiting for me to breathe wrong so they could cut deeper. I turned off the last lamp and the room went quiet. Too quiet. That kind of quiet, where old memories start knocking again, one by one, asking to be let back in. The strange thing was, the memory that came first was not Christmas, not the photo on the floor, not Celeste's laugh. It was a dinner table from years ago, a rickety oak table in a house that smelled like laundry detergent and whatever Mom was cooking that night. No one took pictures back then. No one staged anything. My dad always came home with dust on his jacket. Mom wiped her hands on a dish towel and kissed him on the cheek. Celeste and I argued about who had to set the table. Normal chaos. Real chaos. The kind that never makes it to a holiday card. I sat on my couch and let myself drift back to that time, 15 years earlier, give or take. I remembered the chipped plates, the mismatched cups, the sound of my dad's boots hitting the floor. Mom hummed without realizing she was humming. No one looked perfect. No one tried to. Sometimes the kitchen light flickered because the wiring needed replacing. My dad always said he would fix it next weekend. He had a whole list of things he would fix next weekend. And then one winter, everything shifted. Mom got sick. It started small. A cough, a shadow on a scan. The kind of thing you try not to notice until it becomes all you can see. I was in college at the time, trying to split myself between studying and flying home on cheap tickets from Austin to Charlotte whenever my dad called and said she had a bad day. Celeste stayed closer. She liked to remind me of that. She liked to say she was the one who had to deal with the hard parts. The truth is, she was the one who handled the guests when people came to bring casseroles. I handled the nights in the hospital when the machines beeped at 2 a.m. And Mom whispered that she wasn't scared as long as we stayed with her. After the funeral, the house changed faster than I expected. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was something else. Celeste started cleaning. Not the normal kind, not dusting or sweeping. She cleaned the walls, the frames, the memories. I came home one weekend to an empty hallway where our childhood photos used to hang. The beach trip where Celeste got sunburned so badly she had to walk around with. Aloe plastered on her shoulders. Gone. The picture of me missing 2 teeth and smiling like I had just won the lottery. Gone. The family photo in the backyard where my dad blinked at the wrong time and Celeste's bangs were sticking up because of the wind. Gone. In their place were new pictures. Professional ones. Soft lighting. Coordinated colors. Celeste smiling with her head tilted just right. Her handwriting on the corner of one frame said, "New Beginnings." I remember standing there, smelling the lemon cleaner still lingering in the air, wondering when grief had turned into staging. For a while, I thought she was just coping. Everyone handles loss differently. My dad threw himself into work. I went back to Austin and started running 3 miles every morning until my knees hated me. Celeste curated. She curated the house. She curated her social circle. She curated what she called our family narrative. It sounded harmless the first few times I heard it. Then it became a phrase she used every time I contradicted her version of the past. Our family narrative is complicated, Ellie. People do not need every detail. That was the beginning of me being edited out. Not difficult to do. I lived 15 minutes away, but worked long hours. The startup was everything back then. Long nights, investor meetings, a string of coffee cups piling up on my desk. When I missed a birthday dinner for Ivy because I was in Houston pitching a new platform feature, Celeste told the table I had chosen work over family. She said it with a little shrug, like she was sad for me. I was not there to defend myself. That was sort of the point. The more time passed, the more I noticed that every time I walked into her house, something familiar was gone. A vase Mom loved. A cross-stitch Grandma made 20 years ago. A picture from a camping trip where Celeste wore the same sweatshirt 3 days in. A row because she forgot to pack enough clothes. All missing. Replaced by decor that looked like it came straight from a magazine. Perfect. Impersonal. Safe. One afternoon I asked her about the old photos. She was slicing strawberries in the kitchen. Her knife never paused. She said they did not fit the style of the home anymore. She said they made her sad. She said it like she was reciting from a script, each line practiced until it no longer needed emotion to sound believable. I wanted to argue. I did not. I knew how that conversation would go. She would tilt her head, smile that tight smile of hers, and tell me I was being dramatic. My dad used to tell me to pick my battles. He never imagined the battlefield would be our own living room walls. It took me a long time to understand what Celeste was actually doing. At first I thought she just wanted a nicer house. Then I thought maybe she wanted control after losing Mom. But over time, pattern recognition does what it always does. You stop looking at each moment separately. You see the trend line. Celeste was not redecorating. She was rewriting. She was building a version of our family where she was the center, the caretaker, the hero. And in her version, there was simply no room for an inconvenient sister who remembered the messy parts. The staged photos started appearing on holidays. Easter, Thanksgiving, 4th of July. All coordinated, all edited. I saw one on her social media with a caption that said, "Blessed beyond measure." The picture showed her husband, Ivy in a perfect little dress, and the dog wearing a bandana. I was not in the picture. I had actually been in the house that day, in the kitchen, washing dishes. She did not ask me to step into the frame. She did not even seem to realize she had left me out until I pointed at the finished photo later. She said, "Oh, the lighting was already set. It would have looked uneven if we added another person last minute." Another person. That was what I had become. My dad noticed, but he never said anything. My dad was the kind of man who chose peace over accuracy. When I asked him once why he did not say something, he sighed and said Celeste needs things to be a certain way. It helps her feel steady. He did not say I mattered less. He did not have to. I already knew. There was one moment, though, one I had forgotten until the night she threw the photo. I had brought over a stack of old albums I found in storage. Childhood pictures, vacations, Mom in her garden. Celeste flipped through them like she was checking for damage. Then she closed the album gently, almost reverently, and said, "These are lovely, but maybe we keep them tucked away so guests do not get overwhelmed." Overwhelmed by what? By the truth that we used to be real people. Thinking about all of this in my quiet apartment made something inside me tighten, not painfully, more like recognition settling into place. Years of being cut out piece by piece, and I had still walked into her house, believing that a restored photograph might crack the shell she had built around herself. That was my mistake, not the gift, the expectation. Families like ours do not fall apart in a single moment. They erode quietly. A missing photo here, a rewritten memory there, a sister who edits you out so gradually you do not notice until the frame is completely empty. I did not want to sleep. I walked to the kitchen, made tea I would not drink, sat back on the couch, and stared at the spot where my memory box still sat on the floor. It struck me then how strange it was that I could remember every detail of those early years with Mom and my dad, but Celeste seemed to remember only the parts she could polish. The truth is, Celeste never wanted a family. She wanted a story, and stories can be controlled. Characters can be rearranged, people can be removed. Me. I was removed quietly for years, and then publicly in 10 seconds flat. That was the night I learned I had not just lost a sister. I had been written out of a script I never auditioned for. And maybe, just maybe, stepping out of that role was the only honest thing I had done for our family in a way. Long time. I leaned my head back against the couch and closed my eyes. I let the memories finish their loop. I let them settle, because I knew something was coming, something I had not let myself consider until that moment. If she could erase me from the past that easily, what else had she been rewriting in the present? That was the question still hanging in the air when morning came. I woke up the next morning feeling like someone had rearranged the furniture in my build ahead and forgotten to tell me. Nothing was where it belonged anymore. The question hanging in the air from the night before sat there like a weight. If she could erase me from the past that easily, what else had she been rewriting in the present? I made coffee, burned my tongue on the first sip because I was not paying attention, and stared at my laptop without really seeing it. It took a few minutes before my own life slowly drifted back into focus. My work inbox had 43 unread emails. My calendar had 3 meetings starting at 9. My startup had survived another quarter. Investors were happy. Employees were stable. Everything in my world was functional, except the part with my last name attached to it. People always assume running a tech company in Austin means you live in some modern glass condo with a view of the skyline. I lived in a modest 1-bedroom in the Riverside area, a queen mattress on the floor, 1 sagging bookshelf, a couch my friend insisted I take when she moved to Denver, and a small desk tucked against the window. I never needed more. I had spent 5 years building a B2B platform that automated customer onboarding for mid-sized companies. Not glamorous, not the kind of thing influencers bragged about. But it worked, and it paid well enough that in 2021, when a larger company approached me about a partial acquisition, I accepted. Overnight, I went from stressed founder to quiet investor with a stable monthly payout. Nothing wild, nothing extravagant, just enough to breathe. Having money did not change me as much as it changed the way people around me behaved. Some became nervous. Some assumed I had secrets. Some treated me like I was suddenly a resource instead of a person. Celeste became all three. At first, she called constantly with ideas for how I could give back. She had a talent for making her suggestions sound noble. There is a family in our church who cannot afford their son's medication. The school is doing a fundraiser for new band equipment. The women's shelter needs supplies. I never hesitated. Not once. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the memory of Mom always saying that whatever we had should circulate outward, never inward. Maybe it was the first time in my life when helping did not require me to sacrifice a meal or a night of sleep. Whatever it was, I said yes more often than I said no. Then came the bigger questions. Ivy's private school tuition was due. Their summer camp increased its rates. Her husband's insurance plan did not cover the therapy they wanted for Ivy, my niece, after a difficult year. At first, it was small transfers. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Once I sent 5,000 without blinking because the school had a deadline, and Celeste made it sound like Ivy's entire future rested on being in that specific classroom with that specific teacher. I told myself it was family. The family does not keep score. That was something Mom used to say. The irony is that I was the only one who believed it. I started donating through Celeste instead of directly because she insisted she had the connections. She knew which charities were truly making an impact. She knew the board members. She knew the fundraisers. She knew the directors of after-school programs. She always spoke like she was standing just outside some important meeting room, whispering secrets from inside. I wanted to believe she was doing something meaningful with the access she claimed to have. Every time I asked if she wanted me to give directly, she placed a hand on my arm and said, "People appreciate it more when it comes through someone they already trust." At the time, I thought she meant herself. Now I am not so sure she did. It is embarrassing to admit how easily I said yes. People imagine that someone running a company must be savvy in every part of their life. But family makes fools of all of us. There is something about shared history that lowers your guard. You know the person so well that it does not occur to you they might be using that knowledge strategically. I remember one conversation so clearly I can still hear the dishwasher humming in the background. I had flown back from New York that morning, tired and jet-lagged and desperate for a shower, when Celeste called asking if I could help with a holiday toy drive her church was organizing. I told her yes before she finished the sentence. Then she said it. That line I heard too many times to count. "You help strangers all the time, Ellie. Why is it so hard to help my family?" There was no accusation in her voice. That made it land even harder. The truth was, it was never hard for me. Not once. I was the one making it easy. I was the one smoothing the edges. I was the one writing checks without asking questions, because asking questions felt like admitting I did not trust her. And for some reason, I wanted more than anything to believe she had a better grasp on the world than I did. That she saw needs I could not see from my small tech bubble. That she was the one still rooted in the community, while I was buried in code. And strategy calls. Looking back, that was the moment I handed her more than money. I handed her control, and I did not even realize it. When Ivy started 3rd grade at Westlake Academy, Celeste asked if I could help with the first semester tuition. It was $11,000. I wired it without hesitation. Then came therapy sessions. $200 per appointment. Math club fees. Gymnastics. A new laptop when Ivy said her old one lagged in class. I paid for it all. I never told anyone. Not because I was ashamed, but because talking about it out loud would have forced me to admit how much it was. Helping had turned into something else entirely. It had become a pattern. Predictable. Expected. One time, a woman from the church stopped me in the parking lot and thanked me for sponsoring a Thanksgiving dinner for 7 families. I blinked at her like she had spoken another language. I had no idea what she was talking about. Later that night, Celeste said she had mentioned my name to make it easier for the committee to process the donation. I believed her. I should not have. But I did. There is a specific kind of blindness that comes from loving someone who knows exactly how to use that love. I always assumed if Celeste ever took advantage of me, she would at least feel guilty. But she did not seem guilty at all. She seemed grateful. She hugged me after every transfer. She said I was keeping the family afloat. She said Mom would be proud. She knew exactly which words would keep me quiet. It was not that I loved her more than she loved me. It was that she understood the currency we traded in. Obligation. Gratitude. Shared grief. I was still the little sister trying to keep what was left of our family intact. She was the older sister who knew how to turn that desire into leverage. There was one evening that should have snapped everything into focus. I had gone to her house for dinner. Nothing fancy. Chicken casserole. A salad that tasted like disappointment. After we ate, Celeste excused herself to take a phone call. The living room was warm and dim and filled with framed pictures. All staged. All perfect. All new. Not a single candid moment. Not a single picture of the four of us. I walked to the bookshelf and saw a stack of thank you cards addressed to her. All of them thanked her for the donations I had made. I stood there like an idiot, card in my hand, trying to decide if the warmth in my chest was pride or confusion. It never occurred to me that it might be both. She came back into the room, saw me holding one of the cards, and smiled like she was proud of herself. She said some families do things quietly. I remember nodding. I always nodded. That was my role. The agreeable one. The one who did not make waves. What I did not understand then was that by letting her represent my generosity, the world, I had allowed her to build an identity using my resources. Every time she handed out a donation slip with her name printed on it, she was adding another brick to a foundation she desperately needed. A foundation built on the image of being the selfless, involved, perfectly put together sister. And every time I transferred money without asking for details, I reinforced that foundation for her. The irony of all of this is that I never wanted credit. I hated attention. I still do. I did not want my name on plaques or in newsletters. I wanted kids to have school supplies. I wanted families to have dinner on holidays. I wanted the small, quiet things that matter. Celeste wanted the stage. So when she asked if I could wire another $2,000 for a spring fundraiser, I did it. When she asked if I could cover half of Ivy's robotics club fees, I did it. When she said the church needed help replacing their sound system, I did it. I kept doing it until I stopped keeping track. The last number I remember clearly was $30,000. A donation, she said, would cover summer programs for underprivileged kids. I sent it. I never saw where it went. Sitting in my apartment that morning, sipping cold coffee, that number kept flashing in my mind like a blinking cursor. $30,000. How had I not questioned any of it? How had I let myself become the silent financier of her curated life? The truth is simple. At the time, I thought I was helping my family. I thought I was honoring Mom. I thought generosity could keep us stitched together. What I did not realize was that every stitch I added gave Celeste one more thread to pull. It took me years to understand that generosity without boundaries is not kindness. It is surrender. And I had surrendered without even noticing. By the time I closed my laptop and stood to refill my coffee, one thought had settled so firmly in my mind that I could not shake it. If she had rewritten our history, and she had controlled our present, what exactly had she been doing with the future I kept funding? That was the question that pushed me to finally start looking. I started looking, but not in the dramatic way people imagine. There was no corkboard covered in strings or late-night detective work. It began quietly, almost accidentally, the same way most truths sneak up on you. One morning in late January, I opened my email to find another thank you message addressed to Celeste, but forwarded to me by mistake. A quick line at the bottom caught my eye. It mentioned a donation I had never heard of. A few $1,000s, given in my name. I sat there staring at it while my coffee cooled, feeling something in my chest shift, like a loose tile finally cracking under pressure. So I did the simplest thing in the world. I asked for a receipt. Nothing confrontational, nothing accusatory. I was careful. Too careful, probably. I texted Celeste, asking if she had the documentation from the toy drive and the Thanksgiving dinner program. I kept my tone warm, neutral. The way you speak to someone you do not want to spook. She replied within minutes, unusually quickly for someone who always claimed to be overwhelmed. She said she would gather everything. She added a heart emoji. Celeste never used emojis with me. That was the first flicker of wrongness. Later that afternoon, I drove to the small community center near Lady Bird Lake where one of the programs, supposedly, took place. The building had been renovated recently, still smelling faintly of paint and industrial cleaner. The receptionist, a young woman with freckles across her nose, looked up when I approached the desk. I explained that I was trying to confirm a donation. She smiled politely, clicked around on her computer, and then said something that made my stomach drop. She said, "You talked to our director last fall, right? He said you were going to start donating directly, instead of through family." I just stared at her. I stood there like an idiot with my hands resting on the counter, trying to remember a conversation I knew had never happened. When I asked who she had spoken to, she described Celeste almost perfectly. The dress style, the tone, the way she always presented herself like a committee meeting had just adjourned. Behind her, it was unmistakable. My sister had been speaking in my place, making donations in my name, and apparently making promises she knew nothing about fulfilling. I thanked the receptionist and walked out into the cold January air, my breath forming pale clouds in front of me. Usually I would have been angry, but my mind was strangely quiet. I was not thinking about the donation. I was thinking about the way Celeste had replied so quickly to my text. Too quickly. Something inside me clicked. Not loudly, more like a soft turn of a lock, a realization settling into position. She knew. She knew I had finally stopped moving through the world with my eyes half closed. She knew I was paying attention, not in the emotional way she liked to manipulate, but in the structured, analytical way I approached everything else in my life. Pattern recognition, data comparison, behavioral shifts. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, staring out at the water. Years of working in tech had trained my mind to spot anomalies before anything else. And suddenly, Celeste's entire history with me looked like an anomaly that had been normalized over time. That evening, I decided to call her. Not confront her. Not yet. I just wanted to see how she would react to something small. Something subtle. So I asked if she had found the receipts. Her voice on the phone was soft, almost sugary, like she had coated it in honey. She said she had been so busy. She apologized over and over. She told me I was being so responsible and how grateful she was that I cared. She said she wished she had my attention to detail. She said all the things she never said when we were younger. It felt wrong. I had no other word for it. Growing up, Celeste's tone with me had always been clipped, efficient, slightly irritated no matter what I did. Suddenly she was gentle, agreeable, sweet. I sat in my apartment holding my phone, listening to my sister talk to me like she was auditioning for a role she had not rehearsed enough. It hit me then, a quiet but undeniable certainty. She was scared, not panicked, not hysterical. Celeste would never lose control like that. But she had shifted into a version of herself I had only seen once before, during Mom's last month in the hospital. Back then, she softened because she needed something from me. She needed someone to share the emotional labor with. She needed to look like she was coping. She needed to look like she was the strong one. This felt the same. I hung up the phone and immediately felt that same cold clarity settle in again. She was rearranging her behavior because she had sensed a threat. Not a loud threat, a subtle one. Celeste was perceptive like that. She always felt shifts in power before anyone else did. She could feel that my silent compliance was no longer guaranteed. A few days later, I sent her a straightforward message asking for the paperwork. No explanation, no justification, just a simple reminder. She replied with a long paragraph about being overwhelmed with Ivy's school, schedule, and church events. She used phrases like, "Things have been so hectic," and "I promise I am getting to it." It was the verbal equivalent of placing a hand over my eyes and steering me away from something she did not want me to see. Around that same time, I got a call from the director of another charity I had supported. He said he wanted to confirm something. He asked whether I had intended my donation to be split into multiple programs, or if that had been Celeste's idea. He said it casually, like it was the most normal question in the world. But I could hear something in the background of his voice. Hesitation. Confusion, maybe. Like he sensed something off and was trying to tread carefully. I told him I did not recall specifying anything. I kept my answers short, controlled. That was when he mentioned meeting Celeste at an event months earlier. He said she had spoken as if she were my representative. He even repeated one of her lines. Ellie is too busy saving the world through tech to worry about the small stuff. I felt my jaw tighten. That was when the heat finally crept up my neck. Not anger exactly. More like embarrassment. Embarrassment that she had used my work as a punchline. Embarrassment that I had let her talk about me like I was some absent figure, floating above the world while she did all the meaningful work on the ground. I realized she had been practicing that narrative for a long time, not for my benefit, for hers. When I hung up, I did not pace. I did not cry. I opened my laptop and pulled out an old spreadsheet template I used to track development bugs. I created a new sheet. I labeled the columns date, request, amount, purpose, source. Then I filled in everything I could remember, every transfer, every fundraiser, every urgent message from Celeste. By the time I finished, I had a rough timeline of the last few years laid out in front of me. It was staggering. Not just the money, the pattern, the escalation. It looked like a staircase leading somewhere I had not realized I was walking. 40 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from Celeste. She asked if I wanted to come over for dinner. She said she felt we had been distant. She added a little heart at the end again. It was laughable. Celeste never invited without purpose, and she definitely never used hearts unless she needed someone to relax. I stared at the screen for a long moment. My hands were steady. My breathing even. I typed back that I had planned. She replied instantly, saying she understood, that she loved me, that she missed how close we used to be. It was so out of character, I almost dropped the phone. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that she had sensed the shift. She had no idea what I knew. She had no idea what I suspected. She only knew that the ground beneath her was no longer as stable as she needed it to be. I closed my laptop and sat back on the couch, letting the truth settle in my chest. Celeste was not trying to fix things. She was trying to keep me calm. To keep me predictable. She had survived for years by staying one step ahead of everyone else. She recognized the signs before most people did. And she had recognized them in me. For the first time in my entire life, my sister was watching me, not with affection, not with annoyance, with caution. It should have scared me. It did not. It just made everything clear. And that clarity, quiet as it was the beginning of the unraveling neither of us could stop. Celeste moved quickly, almost elegantly, the way someone does when they have cleaned up a mess before and know exactly which corners to start with. By the end of that week, she sent me a neat little folder in an email titled Updated Records. No greeting, no explanation. Just attachments, receipts, invoices, screenshots of transfers. All perfectly arranged, all matching totals that looked plausible enough to pass a casual glance. The kind of documentation that would convince anyone who wanted to be convinced. I opened each file slowly, one at a time, waiting for my pulse to spike or for anger to rise. But nothing happened. The quiet in my chest stayed quiet. Then I reached the last document. A reimbursement. $200. She said she had accidentally used my money for something trivial and wanted to make it right. That was when I leaned back in my chair and let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. $200. After years of four-figure transfers. After fundraisers and tuition payments and therapy bills. After the Thanksgiving dinner for 7 families that I apparently sponsored, without knowing. Suddenly she remembered ethics. That was the first confirmation, not the receipt itself, the intention behind it. She wanted me to believe she was transparent. She wanted to show that she could admit mistakes. She wanted me to trust her again without ever addressing the larger questions. In a strange way, it was almost impressive. Everything she sent looked legitimate, and if I had not already noticed the cracks, I would have believed her completely. And that was the point. Celeste did not need the truth. She just needed a version of it that could not be challenged. The second confirmation came 2 days later. I was at the grocery store, holding a bunch of cilantro that smelled like regret, when my phone buzzed. It was a woman from her church, someone who had always been polite with me, but not warm. She asked if everything was all right between me and Celeste. I froze there in the produce aisle while shoppers walked around me. I asked her why. She hesitated. Then she said she heard I had been going through a stressful time financially and that I had become overly concerned with small expenses. I stood there staring at the row of avocados like one of them might explain what was happening. Financial stress. Me. I did not bother correcting her. There was nothing to correct. The rumor had already done what it was designed to do: make me look unstable. Make Celeste look patient. Make my questions sound like the anxieties of a woman falling apart. I thanked the woman for checking in and hung up. Then I put the cilantro back. I walked through the rest of the store in a fog, not angry, not even particularly surprised. It was too familiar. Celeste had always been better than me at shaping a narrative. When we were kids, she convinced an entire group of cousins that I had lost her favorite bracelet even, though she had dropped it in a parking lot 3 days earlier. She never admitted it, not even when Mom found it near the car tire. The truth never mattered as much as the belief she created. By the time I got back to my apartment, 3 more messages came in. One from a mutual acquaintance asking if I was all right. One from someone at Ivy's school saying Celeste seemed so worried about me lately. And one from a church member assuring me that I did not need to feel embarrassed about asking so many questions about the donations. I scrolled through the messages slowly, feeling each one land with a soft thud. There was a rhythm to it, a pattern, a perfectly orchestrated drip of concern. That was how Celeste worked. Not with confrontation, with whispers. I did not respond to any of them. Instead, I opened the email folder she sent again and went line by line through the receipts. Not to catch her in anything. Not yet. Just to see how she arranged the pieces. Everything was too perfect. Too orderly. Every receipt had the exact same formatting. Every transfer had a vague description that could mean anything. Community support, family outreach, school assistance, words that sounded generous and said nothing at the same time. Then my phone rang, her name on the screen. I answered on the 4th ring. She jumped straight into it, her tone high and light, the kind she used when she wanted to sound approachable. She said she hoped the records helped. She said she knew I had been feeling overwhelmed. She said she was proud of me for taking finances seriously. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, listening to her reframe my questions as personal instability. She said therapy might help me manage stress better. I almost dropped the phone. She talked like someone who had already crafted the story she needed the world to hear. She made my reasonable concerns sound irrational. She made my spreadsheet sound obsessive. She made my silence sound like guilt. And she did it all with this soft gentleness that felt like someone placing a blanket over your face while asking if you feel warm enough. When she finished, I thanked her. I do not know why. Maybe old habits. Maybe muscle memory. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. The sun was setting, turning the walls a pale orange. My laptop screen dimmed automatically. My apartment felt too small, too quiet. I grabbed my keys and drove without thinking, ending up at the little park near the river. I sat on a bench and watched runners pass, their feet tapping out a steady rhythm on the path. I envied them. They all looked like people who knew where they were headed. As the light faded, I realized something important. Celeste was not scared of what I knew. She was scared of what I might start asking other people. She was scared of losing control of the narrative. And the best way to stop someone from asking questions is to convince everyone else that the questions are a symptom of something fragile. She had not just cleaned the paperwork. She had cleaned the perception. That was when doubt crept in. Not doubt about her, doubt about myself. I started replaying conversations, wondering if I had misunderstood something. Maybe she really did have all those connections. Maybe she really had handled everything properly. Maybe I was overreacting. It is astonishing how easy it is to gaslight yourself when someone you love starts the process for you. There is a strange comfort in believing you are the problem. It gives you something to fix. But then another memory surfaced, a small one. I was 17. Celeste was 22. Mom had been gone for 6 months. My dad was working double shifts. Celeste decided we needed new furniture to make the house feel fresh. She spent an entire weekend rearranging everything. When I said I missed the old couch because Mom always sat there to braid my hair, Celeste told me I was being sentimental and that the new couch would help us move on. I have never forgotten the tone she used. Patient, reasonable, firm. The same tone she used on the phone earlier. I left the park when the cold became too sharp. Back in my apartment, I opened the spreadsheet again. I went through every line one more time. Not to solve anything, just to anchor myself. Facts, dates, numbers. Concrete things that did not shift with emotion. I needed something solid to hold on to while Celeste was bending the air around me. Around 8 that night, she called again. Twice. I let both calls go to voicemail. The third time, she left a message. She sounded sad, concerned. She said she hoped I was not pulling away. She said family was everything. She said she felt like she was losing me. I sat there with the phone on my kitchen counter, listening to her voice fill the room like a fog. She knew exactly which strings to pull. I did not call back. The next morning, I stopped by a coffee shop near my place. It was early. The baristas looked half awake. As I waited for my drink, I overheard 2 women from her church talking near the window. They did not know me. They said they felt sorry for Celeste. They said she was handling so much pressure. They said I had always been unpredictable. I stood there with my hand wrapped around a paper cup that suddenly felt too hot. My throat tightened, not from shame, from clarity. Celeste had laid the groundwork quickly. She had positioned herself as the stable one, the responsible one, the one doing everything she could to keep the family together. And I was the unstable younger sister causing chaos. It was brilliant in its simplicity. No overt accusations, just gentle implications. A well-placed sigh, a concerned expression. Enough for people to fill in the gaps on their own. When I got home, my phone buzzed again with another message from her. She said she wanted to talk. She said communication was the key to healing. I turned my phone face down on the table and let it vibrate until it stopped. I understood then that she was not just cleaning up paperwork. She was cleaning me up. She was rearranging me into a version that made sense for her narrative. A version she could manage. A version she could dismiss if needed. But I stayed quiet. Not because I was scared, not because I wanted to avoid conflict. I stayed quiet because I needed to see how far she would take it. I needed to see how much she was willing to rewrite. I needed her to show me the full shape of her story before I decided how to write mine. Celeste showed me more than I expected. She showed me exactly how far she would go to keep her version of the world intact. And as it turned out, she was willing to go farther than I ever imagined. The first sign arrived on a Thursday morning in late February. I was sitting at my desk with a mug of coffee that tasted burned, sifting through emails, when I saw a message from a name I recognized instantly. It belonged to a man in the Austin business community, someone I had met at a conference years earlier. Polite, quiet, the kind of person who never wasted time with unnecessary words. His subject line was brief. Quick question about a nonprofit connection. I read the email twice, then a third time. He said he had recently spoken with my sister about supporting several communities, programs. He said she had mentioned my past involvement. He said he wanted to make sure everything aligned before making a significant commitment. He used the phrase significant commitment like it was nothing, but I knew what that meant. Nobody in his circle used that phrase for anything small. We were talking at least 5 figures, maybe 6. I sat back in my chair. The room suddenly felt too small. The hum of my desktop fan seemed louder. It did not surprise me that Celeste was looking for a new donor. What surprised me was how casually he mentioned that she had spoken about me. He even repeated one of her lines. Ellie is too busy revolutionizing the tech world to worry about the boring details of charity. I closed my eyes and pictured her saying that with a little laugh. The same laugh she used to dismiss my concerns about our mom's medical bills those years ago. I wrote him back with a short message saying I would be happy to talk. I kept it neutral. No alarms, no background, just availability. He responded within minutes and asked if I could stop by his office that afternoon. When someone with his schedule makes room that quickly, you pay attention. His office was in a low-rise building in downtown Austin, near the water, with clean lines and glass walls that made everything look expensive and temporary. At the same time, he greeted me with a firm handshake and gestured toward a small meeting room. No assistants, no coffee tray, just 2 chairs and a notebook. He sat across from me and smiled politely, the way a person does when they are about to ask something delicate. He said he had met Celeste at a fundraiser. He said she was charismatic, passionate, very persuasive. He said she spoke about the programs she managed with confidence. Then he paused, tapping the corner of his notebook gently with one finger. He said he had heard my name often in connection with the work she claimed to be doing. He wanted to confirm that the organizations she mentioned were in fact aligned with my philanthropic history. He said the sentence with no judgment, just curiosity. I nodded slowly. I felt myself slipping into the version of me that handled investor meetings. The calm one. The strategic one. The one who listened first. I asked him which organizations she had referenced. As he listed them one by one, I felt something cold stir in my stomach. A few of them were familiar. A few were ones I had donated to directly years earlier. Others were ones I had never heard of. And one was an organization that had reached out to me 2 weeks earlier asking for clarification about a donation I had supposedly made. When he finished speaking, I took a quiet breath. Then I said something simple. I told him I had supported some of those organizations, but not through a representative. I said I generally preferred direct giving because it kept things transparent. I kept my tone mild, almost apologetic. I did not mention Celeste. I did not correct his impression of her. I simply answered his question in the cleanest way possible. He nodded slowly. I saw his expression shift, not dramatically, but enough to tell me he had suspected something was off before he ever called me. He closed his notebook, thanked me for the clarity, and stood. It was over in less than 15 minutes. On my way out of the building, I realized my hands were steady again. Too steady. It was becoming a pattern. My body recognized the truth before my mind fully caught up. By the time I reached my car, he had already sent a follow-up email thanking me for my time. He said he appreciated honest conversations. His wording made something click inside me. Celeste had not just been searching for a new donor. She had been building a replacement for me. Someone who would let her manage a larger stream of money without questions. Someone who would not ask for receipts. Someone she could charm into silence. She must have been relieved to find someone with that level of influence. She must have felt unstoppable, untouchable, vindicated. I drove home with the windows cracked open, letting the cool air hit my face, trying to make sense of why I did not feel angrier. Instead, I felt strangely detached, as if I were watching a play unfold from a balcony seat. Celeste was on stage, performing the role she had perfected, the devoted community member. The organized fundraiser, the bridge between need and generosity. And I had been backstage for years, unaware that she was using my resources as props. That afternoon, I went for a walk around Lady Bird Lake. The water was still. Ducks glided across the surface without leaving much of a ripple. People ran past me in clusters. A woman walked a dog that looked like it needed therapy. A couple held hands and argued about something that sounded like paint colors. Life moved on, with or without clarity. I envied the simplicity of it. Halfway around the loop, my phone buzzed with a text from Celeste. She said she had exciting news and wanted to share it in person. She added that she felt so blessed lately and hoped I did too. I stared at the message for a full minute. Blessed. She loved that word. She used it like a shield, a way to make questionable things seem righteous. I did not reply. 2 hours later, she called. I let it ring. Then she texted again. She said she had found a donor who could help her expand her outreach efforts. She said this could relieve me of the burden I had carried for so long. The burden, as if giving had weighed on me, as if generosity had been some exhausting task she had taken off my hands. The next morning, I woke up to another message from her. She said she was proud of herself for making connections. She said she felt like everything was finally coming together. She ended with a little sparkle emoji she definitely did not learn from me. I sat at my desk with her message open, thinking about everything she must have been feeling. Confidence, relief, a sense of triumph. She had no idea that the man she spoke to had already contacted me. She had no idea that her charm had hit a wall she could not manipulate. She had no idea there were parts of the business world where narratives did not matter and math did. I closed my laptop and stood by the window, watching cars move along the street like a slow river. For the first time, I could see her plan clearly. It was not complicated. She wanted independence from me. Not emotional independence, financial independence. She wanted leverage. Once she had another donor secured, she could rewrite the story entirely. She could say I had stepped back willingly. She could say she was the primary force behind every charitable movement. She could say loudly and proudly that she no longer relied on my help. Then she could continue her curated life without any loose threads. But she had made a mistake. A small one. A simple one. She had reached into a world she did not understand. A world where people checked details. A world where reputations mattered. A world where every claim could be verified with a phone call. And she never expected the phone call would be to me. Later that day, while I was trying to focus on a project, I got another message from the businessman. He said he was postponing his involvement until he had more clarity. He thanked me again for my honesty. He said he appreciated transparency. That word felt almost medicinal. I typed a brief reply and closed my computer. Then I sat back and let the reality settle over me. Celeste had reached for something she was not equipped to handle. She had stepped outside the carefully controlled environment she had built and into one where the truth had teeth. And without realizing it, she had pulled the first thread of her own unraveling. I looked around my apartment at the little markers of my life. The worn couch, the plant that refused to grow, the half-finished coffee mug on my desk. Everything looked the same, but felt different. The distance between us had always been emotional. Now it was structural, tangible, a shift that could not be undone by a smile or a well-placed rumor. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted my apartment in pale gold, I realized something simple and unsettling. Celeste thought she had found her way out. She thought she had secured her freedom from me. She thought she no longer needed my money or my silence. She had no idea that the person she needed to convince the most was the one she had already lost. And she definitely did not know that the question that started pulling every thread loose was not what she had forged or hidden. It was the one simple question that the donor had asked. Is this aligned with what Ellie usually supports? That was the moment everything began to shift. And the weight of it settled quietly, waiting for what came next. I drove home that night with the kind of clarity that does not make noise. It just settles. It sits in your chest like a stone that finally decides where it belongs. Celeste thought she had stepped into a world where charm could replace structure, where confidence could disguise risk, where presentation could outrun truth. She had no idea her timing was off by just enough to expose everything she was trying to hide. And I had no interest in hurrying the collapse. I was done rushing on her behalf. The next morning, I brewed coffee and let it go cold twice before I finally sat at my desk. My computer hummed to life. I opened my email and stared at the blank composition window. It took me a minute to realize I was not hesitating out of fear. I was deciding what version of myself I wanted to be in this interim space between knowing and acting. I chose the quieter one, the one who had learned that silence speaks as loudly as any accusation, especially to read between lines. I wrote one sentence. I no longer donate through intermediaries and prefer direct alignment with Foundation's financial transparency standards. That was it. No background, no elaboration, no emotional residue. I did not mention Celeste. I did not hint at mismanagement. I did not use words like discrepancy or concern. I hit send and let the message leave my screen and enter a world where it would do exactly what it needed to do without any additional push from me. The donor replied less than 20 minutes later. He thanked me. He said he understood. He said transparency was the backbone of sustainable philanthropy. Words that made me think he had been waiting for someone to confirm what he already sensed. His tone shifted in a way only a trained ear would notice. A small shift. but enough to tell me he had begun questioning everything Celeste had told him. I closed that email and opened another window. One by one, I redirected every recurring donation I had set up through her into direct channels: youth centers, food banks, mental health support programs. I reached out to each foundation personally, established new accounts, and set up direct monthly contributions. No fanfare, no public announcement, no ripple for Celeste to catch. It took me nearly an hour to move everything cleanly. When I finished, my office was quiet in a way that felt almost ceremonial. Around midday, my phone buzzed with a text from Celeste. She said she had wonderful news. She said she had been in meetings all morning. She said she might be closer than ever to securing long-term funding for her projects. She added a celebratory emoji that seemed to bounce off my screen like a rubber ball. I read it twice and put my phone face down. 15 minutes later, another message. She asked if I had time for a quick call. She said she wanted my advice. She used the word advice as if we were still operating as a team, as if my support was something she could summon on demand. I let that message sit as well. That evening, I opened the notebook where I kept track of my charitable commitments. I flipped through pages marked with careful handwriting and clipped receipts. My dad used to call this my ledger of good intentions. He said it with a teasing smile, but also with a kind of pride he never quite managed to hide. After he and my mom died, I kept the ledger more out of habit than anything else. But sitting there, with the light from the lamp falling across the page, I realized something simple. The ledger was mine again. It had not been mine for a long time. Celeste had been operating as its gatekeeper. She had rearranged it, reinterpreted it, presented her version of it to the world as if she had built it herself. For the first time in years, I was looking at my own intentions without her handwriting on top of them. The next week passed in a strange state of calm. Celeste texted often, updates framed with confidence and excitement. She hinted that everything was aligning. She used phrases like finally catching momentum and things are moving. She had no idea those things were moving because the support she believed she had was evaporating quietly behind her. On Wednesday afternoon, while I was in line at a coffee shop near downtown, she called again. I let it ring out. She left a voicemail. She said she could sense something shifting in our relationship and wanted to make sure we were still on the same page. The same page. She had said that exact phrase once, years earlier, when she asked me to cover a bill for Ivy's school tuition because her husband's paycheck had been delayed. I remember her voice that day, soft and earnest, so different from the one she used now, the one that sounded like a polished version of care. That night, I replayed her voicemail. Not the words, just the tone. I could hear the edges of uncertainty beginning to fray beneath her confidence. But she was still performing strength, performing certainty, performing the version of herself that believed winning required the appearance of already having won. 2 days later, the donor emailed again. He said he had decided to pause all commitments until further notice. He thanked me for my clarity and said he appreciated integrity in philanthropic work. He copied the director of one of the youth programs I had supported for years. She replied within minutes expressing gratitude for my continued direct involvement. The donor responded to her with a short message that made my pulse skip. He asked if she had worked with Celeste in an official capacity. She said no. He thanked her. The entire exchange took place in less than 5 minutes. I sat at my desk watching each message arrive. The quiet unraveling had begun. Over the weekend, Celeste posted photos from a brunch on social media. She captioned them with phrases about new partnerships and expanding horizons. She tagged several people, but the donor was not one of them. I noticed that immediately. She had not earned the partnership yet. She was still in anticipation, in fantasy, in projection. The photos were bright and polished. Her smile looked stretched. Ivy sat beside her, wearing a dress that looked uncomfortable. I wondered if she sensed anything brewing beneath her mom's surface. Kids always do before adults do. On Monday morning, Celeste called while I was pulling into the parking garage at my office. I answered, partly out of curiosity, partly because ignoring her indefinitely did not serve the clarity I needed. She launched into updates before I could even greet her. She talked about meetings, about strategy, about expanding her circle. Then she mentioned the donor. She said he was enthusiastic. She said she felt like they were finally building something stable together. I listened without responding. My silence startled her. She stalled. Then she said she could tell something was off in my voice. She asked if everything was all right. I said everything was fine. My tone was even, calm. She hesitated. Then she said she hoped I was not feeling overburdened and reassured me that she would be able to take the community work off my shoulders soon. It was the phrasing that did it. Off my shoulders, as if generosity had been a weight she alone had been carrying. I let the silence hang a beat too long. Then I said nothing of consequence. I thanked her for the update, said I had a meeting, and ended the call. It was not what I said that unsettled her. It was what I did not say. People like Celeste build their confidence on controlling the script. When the script shifts, even slightly, the stage lights feel too bright. Later that week, I had a meeting with the foundation director I had known for years. She asked gently if everything was all right with my family. I must have reacted because she quickly clarified that she had only asked because Celeste had contacted her recently. She said Celeste had mentioned my name in connection with a future project. She said she had not committed to anything because something in the conversation felt unsettled. She asked if I had changed my approach to giving. I nodded. She smiled. She said she appreciated clarity. She did not ask for an explanation. She did not need one. By the time Friday arrived, the air around the entire situation had shifted. Celeste still believed she was winning. She still believed she had successfully redirected the narrative. She still believed she had replaced me without consequence. That part almost made me sad. But sadness had long since stepped aside to make room for a quieter, heavier understanding. I had not exposed her. I had not confronted her. I had not dismantled her version of events. I had simply withdrawn my part of the story, and in doing so, I had removed the foundation she had been standing on. People often assume that revenge requires loud moves, grand gestures, explosions that light up every corner of a room. But sometimes, revenge is something else entirely. It is the moment you decide not to participate in someone's illusion anymore. The moment you remove the hand they did not know they were standing on. The moment you choose silence over justification. By saying almost nothing, I had said everything. And Celeste, still smiling in photos, still posting captions about new beginnings, still believing the world was bending in her favor, had no idea that the ground beneath her was already beginning to shift. I closed my notebook late that night. A calm kind of certainty settled in my chest, the kind that comes not from anger, but from acceptance. Not from retaliation, but from clarity. She thought she was winning. She had no idea the game had already changed, and I had changed it by simply stepping out of her frame. 8 days passed before I understood why Celeste threw the photo book away. Not the surface reason she performed in front of everyone, calling it cheap and worthless and telling me to keep it myself. That was theater. That was a woman protecting something fragile by pretending she was made of steel. What I finally understood was that the book did not offend her. It threatened her. It reminded her of a family she could not edit, a history she could not retouch, a version of herself she could not upgrade with filters or curated posts. And when she believed she had finally pushed me out of her financial shadow, she decided she could push me out of the story entirely. It is strange how clarity arrives. Sometimes loud, sometimes quiet. This time, it came as a memory, sharp and unwelcome. While I was pouring coffee on a Tuesday morning, I remembered the way her hand hovered over the book before she threw it. Not disgusted, not a shock, barely even annoyance. It looked like hesitation, the tiniest flicker. And then her fingers released, and the book hit the hardwood floor with a flat sound that made every conversation in the room stutter for half a second. At that moment, I thought the flicker was guilty. I gave her that much credit. I should not have. Looking back, I know exactly what it was. Recognition. She knew what she was throwing away. She knew what the book represented, and she knew that if she kept it, even for a moment, the image she had spent years constructing might crack. It took me nearly 2 weeks to piece that together. 2 weeks of replaying her voice in my voicemail, her texts about the donor, her eager updates about her new partnerships. 2 weeks of watching her display the kind of confidence that only comes from believing you have eliminated the last threat to your performance. I understood it finally on a Wednesday after work, while I sat in my car in the garage of my building. The lights above hummed. Someone slammed a door on the level below. A kid laughed somewhere in the distance. And I thought about the photo book not as an object, but as a mirror. Because that is what it was to her. A mirror showing her a version of the family she had spent years burying. The pictures inside were not perfect. Some were grainy, some were crooked, some had sun glare. One had my dad blinking. But they were real. And real was the one thing Celeste could not afford. Not anymore. She had built a new family narrative, one she curated like a brand. Pictures hung in her living room from expensive sessions with coordinated outfits and imported lighting. Holiday cards that looked more like catalogs than greetings. Social posts cropped and filtered until they barely resembled the people in them. None of those included me. Not because of a fight, not because of distance, but because I did not fit the image she wanted the world to see. The photo book I made did not care about her image. It told the truth, a truth she could not manipulate. That evening in the garage, I closed my eyes and let that sink in. She did not nuke the photo book because it was worthless. She destroyed it because it made her visible to herself. And nothing scares a person like Celeste more than an unedited reflection. But the timing mattered even more. She threw the book away the very night she believed she had secured independence from me. That donor she had chased, the one she thought would elevate her from local committee leader to regional philanthropic star, had given her just enough encouragement to make her believe she had replaced me. She took that as a sign, a green light, a permission slip to erase me fully, publicly, ceremonially. When she tossed the book, she was not reacting to the gift. She was celebrating what she believed was a victory. I realized that part later, after a conversation with someone I had not expected to hear from. It was the foundation director I had known for years, the one who asked gently if everything was all right in my family. She called me the day after I redirected my donations. She said there had been a sudden uptick in inquiries about Celeste's involvement in several programs. She said a few organizations were beginning internal reviews. She did not say why, but I could hear the undercurrent. Systematic inconsistencies. Betrayals that did not match. Questions that had no answers. I thanked her, and she paused before hanging up. Then she said something that lingered with me. She said the timing felt interesting. I asked what she meant. She said it was unusual for several unrelated centers to raise flags at once unless someone had drawn attention to the pattern. She said she wondered if perhaps a new donor had attempted to verify something and found discrepancies. Her voice was calm, but she was nudging me toward the truth. Not my truth, Celeste's. Celeste did not know it yet, but the moment she threw away that photo book at the Christmas party was the same. The moment the system began to turn its head toward her. Not because of me. I had stayed silent. Not because of a rumor, but because she had stepped into a world that audited everything, and they had started to audit her. The idea that she believed she was untouchable made the memory of her laugh echo louder in my mind. It was the laugh of a person who believed she had outsmarted everyone, including the truth. A few days after that conversation with the director, I ran into Ivy and my brother-in-law at the grocery store. It was a Saturday morning. The store smelled faintly like oranges and floor cleaner. Ivy waved at me from behind the produce section. He looked tired, the kind of tired that family tension etches into a person slowly. We chatted for a moment. Ivy told me about her school project on marine animals. She talked fast, excited. I listened. My brother-in-law shifted uncomfortably and finally said Celeste had been under unusual stress lately. He said she had been working harder than ever. He said he hoped things would settle soon. I almost told him they would not, but I kept that to myself. I drove home thinking about that conversation and about how Celeste's world operated in layers. Public image on top, family narrative beneath, financial maneuvering beneath that, and under everything, real fear. Fear that the truth was catching up. People like Celeste do not unravel in one dramatic moment. They unravel in small tears that eventually become too large to hide. The donor stepped back. The foundation director raised questions. The new donor asked me for verification. The youth center requested updated documentation. Each was a thread. Each tugged on the next. And Celeste, in her confidence, had no idea her threads were loosening. Which brought me back to the photo book. The night she threw it away, She performed a small ritual without realizing it, a ritual of closure, a declaration that she had cut the last piece of the old story loose. She thought throwing away the book erased me. She thought it erased the past. She thought it erased any claim I had to the narrative she built. But what she did not know was that the book had already done its job. It had forced her to see something she could not unsee, something she would do anything to avoid. The unedited version of herself. Her mistake was assuming she had won, that she had moved past the part of the story where consequences existed, that the world she built would continue spinning on the axis she designed. It never crossed her mind that the systems she infiltrated, the programs she spoke for, the donors she targeted, the committees she performed on, all had one thing in common. They were built on verification. She never imagined they would verify her. The following week, the youth center director emailed me again. She thanked me for my continued support and mentioned casually that they were conducting an internal audit as part of routine compliance. I knew it was not routine. I knew it was the ripple effect of that donor's simple question. I knew Celeste was already feeling something shift beneath her feet, even if she could not name it yet. And that was the moment it all clicked. She threw the photo book away because she believed she had removed the last witness to her truth. She believed she had closed a chapter she no longer needed. She believed she had cleansed her life of anything that reminded her where she came from. But families are not stories you can rewrite once they are printed. And audits do not stop because a person believes they should. The book was never garbage. It was evidence. Not legal evidence, emotional evidence, historical evidence, proof of a version of our family she could not recreate with her curated lens. She did not throw it away because she underestimated its value. She threw it away because she recognized it too clearly. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights low, replaying everything in my mind, tracing the lines backward until I reached the moment the unraveling began. It was not the donor's call. It was not the audit. It was not even the text she sent announcing her new partnerships. It was her hand hovering over the photo book. That flicker, that recognition, that was the moment she knew the truth was still alive. And Celeste had spent years trying to bury anything alive. She threw the photo book away to bury me, to bury our real history, to bury the unedited version of her life. But she forgot one thing. You cannot bury something that is already rising. As I sat there, the room quiet, my coffee cooling on the table beside me, I realized something else, something colder, something sharper. The last decision she made without fear was the night she threw that book. Everything after that moved differently, as if the world had turned its face toward her and begun watching, quietly at first. Then with the kind of stillness that makes a person feel exposed without knowing why. I did not push anything. I did not warn anyone. I did not whisper her name into the wrong ears. I simply went on with my life, and the system, with its own rhythm and its own instincts, began pausing around her. That is how it started. With pauses. The first pause came from the donor she had chased so proudly. He had not returned her last email, and she left me a voicemail asking if I knew whether he was traveling. She said it lightly, as if she was making conversation, but the tremor in her voice was faintly visible underneath. I did not respond. I had nothing useful to offer her. And truthfully, she did not want the truth. She wanted reassurance, and I had decided not to give her any more illusions to stand on. The second pause came from the youth center. They suspended all new partnerships for an internal review. The announcement was routine and bland, but the timing was unmistakable. They had not yet reached out to her, but they had paused her proposals. The ones she had told everyone were already approved. She posted a smiling photo with Ivy after that, standing in front of a mural at the center. The caption said, "Forward momentum." I read it twice and wondered how long she would be able to pretend. The third pause came from the church council. They suspended all volunteer committee restructuring until summer, which meant Celeste, who had been positioning herself for a leadership role, had nowhere to climb for the moment. Again, no scandal, no confrontation. Just a stop in the movement she depended on to maintain her image. She baked muffins that week and delivered them to neighbors. A performance of warmth. a signal that she was still flourishing. Even Ivy looked confused carrying the trays. The fourth pause came from the school board, the kind of question nobody asks unless someone has already seen some irregularity. They did not mention her name. They did not need to. She had been the loudest voice in that space, and silence around a loud person can be more damning than accusation. By the end, everyone was slowing down except her. Celeste was still moving with the frantic energy of someone who is trying to outrun, something she can feel catching up. She called me on a Thursday afternoon while I was working. I stared at her name on the screen, debated ignoring it again, then answered, not out of kindness, out of curiosity. Her voice, she asked if I had heard about the youth center review. I said yes, briefly, because the director had notified donors. She asked if I knew why the donor from Austin had not replied. I said I did not. She asked if I was available later that evening. I said I was not. Each answer tightened her silence on the other end. Then she took a breath and said something sharp, like a blade catching the light. She said she felt like something had changed between us. She said I had been distant. She said she did not understand why. She used the word why with a strain in her voice I had not heard since we were teenagers, and she was afraid of disappointing Mom. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I told her nothing had changed, except the fact that I no longer donated through intermediaries. She went still. Completely still. Her silence lasted long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then she said she hoped I was not misunderstanding anything. She used that exact phrase. A phrase that adults use to talk to children. A phrase that people use when they want to control the narrative. I said I understood everything perfectly. She asked what that meant. I let the quiet stretch until it strained. Then I said it meant exactly what it sounded like. She exhaled sharply. She asked if someone had told me something. She asked if I had talked to the board. She asked if I had reached out to any center. I told her no. Her voice cracked. She said she felt like I was punishing her. I said I was not punishing anyone. I just preferred clear documentation and direct giving. She said that made her look unreliable. She said people would think the pause in her roles had something to do with me. She said the timing was terrible. I said timing often reveals the truth. She snapped then. Her voice grew loud in that tight, breathless way people use when they are terrified, but refused to admit it. She accused me of sabotaging her. She said she had worked too hard to be undermined now. She said she had dedicated herself to serving the community and refused to let my personal doubts destroy her progress. The words flooded out fast, uncontrolled. I waited for her to stop. Then I said something I had practiced only once in my head, but felt ready to say. I told her I did not destroy her image. I simply stopped maintaining it. There was a long pause. Such a long pause that I imagined her standing in her kitchen, gripping the counter, staring at the floor tiles she had chosen during her remodel, trying to locate some version of control she could still hold. She whispered my name. I did not respond. She said she knew this had to do with the photo book. She said something about how she knew it hurt me, how she had apologized in her heart, how she acted impulsively. She said she had been overwhelmed that night and had not meant anything by it. She said it was not a big deal. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because of how badly she misunderstood what the book represented. She thought it was about sentiment, about the object, about the paper and the photos and the handwritten notes. It was not. It was about the one thing she feared most. A record she could not curate. A history she could not filter. I said nothing. She rushed in to fill the quiet. She said she wished I had brought something more thoughtful, something that fit the event, something more presentable. Presentable. I felt the word land between us like a cold weight. Then she said she regretted throwing it away. Not because she wanted it back, because she suspected that is when I started pulling away. She said the book made her feel exposed. She said it brought up things she had tried to move past. She said she wished it had remained private. I finally spoke. I said the book was already private. She was the one who made it public when she threw it away. She inhaled sharply. I could hear her swallow. Then she tried a different tactic. Her voice softened. She said she was overwhelmed and tired and trying her best. She said people were suddenly asking more questions than usual. She said she felt targeted. She said she just needed a bridge until things settled. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The room felt still. I thought about all the times I had built that bridge for her. Quietly, carefully, without asking for credit. Without asking for gratitude. I thought of the years of covering tuition, camp expenses, fundraisers, the years of paying for things she claimed she had secured herself. I thought about the countless moments where she used my support as the foundation for her image. And I thought of her wrist, because she believed she no longer needed anything from me. I said no, not loudly, not harshly, just clearly. The word hung there, solid, final. She gasped. She said she could not believe I would do that to her. She said family was supposed to stick together. She said Mom would be disappointed in me. I closed my eyes at that. People often reach for the dead when they want to hurt the living. I let her finish. The one that ended the conversation more completely than anything else could. I said I did not destroy her image. I simply stopped maintaining it. She made a small sound like something between a breath and a cry. Then she hung up. I sat there for several minutes, phone still in my hand, staring at the wall. My pulse was steady. My breathing is calm. Years ago, a conversation like that would have shattered me. Now it felt like something else. Like alignment. Like truth choosing its place. Over the next few days, the pauses around her grew heavier. The donor sent a formal note withdrawing interest. The youth center confirmed their suspension of parent-led initiatives pending review. The church council posted a bulletin noting a temporary freeze on community leadership roles. The school board announced a transparency audit of fundraising groups. No one mentioned her directly. They did not need to. Systems do not always confront people. Sometimes they simply stop protecting them. On Sunday morning, I drove past her neighborhood. People were outside walking dogs, picking up newspapers, tending to front lawns. Normal life. The kind she used to photograph and post as proof of her own perfection. I wondered if anyone inside those houses sensed the quiet shift happening just a few blocks away. That afternoon, Ivy called me. Her voice was small. She asked if everything was all right. I said everything was fine. She said her mom had been crying a lot. I did not know what to say. Children always know the truth before adults do. They feel it in the atmosphere. I told her I loved her. She told me she missed me. Then she said something that broke me more than anything her mother had ever done. She asked if I still had the photo book. I swallowed hard. I told her yes. She asked if she could see it someday. I said of course. She exhaled in relief, as if she was afraid it had disappeared, as if the memory of our family had been lost forever. Her voice softened. She said she remembered the picture on the first page, the one of Mom standing in the backyard, with both of us beside her. She said she remembered that day. I believed her. Some memories stay, even when the people who lived them pretend they never happened. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, the late afternoon light falling along the floor in soft lines. I realized the system had done what I never needed to do. It had stepped back. It had withheld trust. It asked questions. It had paused. And when enough pauses align, they create a kind of silence that roars. Celeste had spent years performing for every system she touched. Church, school, charity, community. And each system had allowed the performance because she delivered it with confidence and charm. But charm works only as long as the structure beneath it remains intact. Without my contributions, the structure failed. She thought I attacked her. I had done nothing except walk away, and the world around her finally stopped pretending not to see. By evening, my phone buzzed with one last message from her. No greeting, no explanation, just one question. What did you do? I typed slowly. I did not destroy anything. I simply stopped holding it up. Then I put my phone down and watched the daylight fade. Something was ending, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that felt permanent. And for the first time in years, I did not feel responsible for saving her from the ending she had written for herself. 6 months passed quietly. The kind of quiet that does not announce itself. It settles in layers. In this way, mornings feel lighter. In this way, evenings no longer hum with tension. In the way a person begins to breathe again without realizing they had been holding their breath for years. By the time summer rolled into Austin, I had almost forgotten what it felt like to check my phone expecting a crisis. I woke each day to my own rhythm, not the rhythm of a person trying to manage someone else's chaos. Routine became something steady again. Coffee, work, walks along Lady Bird Lake, silence that felt earned. Celeste had faded into the background, not abruptly, not dramatically, but gradually, like a photograph left in the sun. Her life did not implode. It simply stopped expanding. The church committee chose someone else. The school board moved on. The donor never replied. The youth center solidified their new guidelines and filled their leadership roles without consulting her. There was no scandal, no headline, no pointed accusation, just the gentle but unmistakable fact that the systems she once navigated with ease had quietly stopped revolving around her. My decision to step back had done what confrontation never could. It created space for truth to breathe. One Saturday morning in early June, I found myself standing in front of a blank section of wall in my living room with a hammer in one hand and the restored family photo in the other. I had taken the picture to a professional in Charlotte earlier that year, the same trip where I first realized how much of my life I had allowed Celeste to storyboard for me. The restorer had repaired the cracks, sharpened the color, and brought it back to life in a way that made it feel less like an artifact, more like a heartbeat, preserved on paper. For months, I kept the photo inside a drawer. Not because it hurt me, because I wanted to choose the right moment, a moment that belonged to me instead of the echo of her rejection. That morning was it. I measured the wall twice. I tapped the nail gently into the drywall, leaving a small indentation. Then I hung the photo. It settled into place with a soft click, framed in dark wood that warmed under the sunlight streaming through my window. The picture was simple. Mom standing in the backyard, her hair loose around her shoulders, one hand shading her eyes from the sun. My dad is behind the grill. Celeste and I sat at the picnic table, wearing grass-stained knees and mismatched shirts. No makeup, no filters, no poses. Just a real day in a real life that no longer existed. And yet, seeing it there on my wall did not break me. It grounded me. I stepped back, arms crossed loosely, and let myself feel the weight of it. This was where I came from. Not the curated world Celeste built, not the polished holiday cards, not the staged fundraisers or the smiling brunch photos she posted online. This picture was the truth, ordinary and beautiful in all the ways that never needed to be performed. Later that afternoon, I printed a second copy. I drove to North Austin, where Ivy had been spending weekends at her dad's townhouse. She was waiting outside when I pulled up, sitting on the steps with a book in her lap. She waved at me with the kind of enthusiasm only children manage without effort. My brother-in-law opened the door and smiled, telling Ivy that I was welcome to stay for dinner if I wanted. I thanked him and said maybe next time. Y grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the curb. She asked if I had brought anything. I told her I had something small. Her eyes lit up instantly. She had always been perceptive, more than Celeste ever allowed her to be. We sat on the steps. The concrete was warm under us. Cars passed lazily on the quiet street. I handed her the envelope with the new print. She opened it carefully, as if it might be fragile. When she saw the picture, she drew in a breath. She touched the corner with her thumb and whispered that she remembered that backyard. She said she remembered my mom's laugh. She said she remembered the sound of my dad's radio playing classic rock. She stared at the picture for a long time, then looked up at me. "This is where you come from," I said gently, watching her expression shift from curiosity to something softer. Something that looked like belonging. She asked if her mom had seen the picture again. I told her no. She nodded as if she expected that answer. Then she asked if Celeste ever talked about that day. I told her honestly that I did not know, but I doubted it. She looked down at the picture again, tracing the edge with her fingernail. She said quietly that sometimes she felt like she was supposed to pretend her family had always been perfect. Those mistakes never happened. Those arguments never existed. That life was always bright and polished. She said it felt exhausting. She looked up at me with eyes that were too wise for her age and asked if Mom would ever tell her the truth someday. I told her I hoped so, and that if her mom could not, I would. My brother-in-law stepped outside to ask if Ivy wanted lemonade. She nodded. He handed us each a cup, then went inside again, leaving the door partially open. Ivy took a sip and leaned against my arm. She asked me why her mom had thrown the photo book away. I felt the question in my chest like a bruise being touched. I told her something simple and true. I said not everyone is ready to look at the parts of themselves that cannot be edited. She thought about that. Then she nodded slowly, as if the answer made sense in a way that frightened her a little. She asked if she could keep the picture in her room. I said it was hers now. She folded the envelope carefully, holding it against her chest. She said it felt like a piece of something she had been missing. I swallowed hard. Moments like that feel small from the outside, but they carve space inside a person. We sat in silence for a while, just the sound of a sprinkler ticking across a neighbor's yard, the gentle hum of a lawnmower 2 houses down, the breeze brushing the leaves of the big oak tree overhead. Then she asked the question that surprised me most. She asked if I hated her mom. I told her no. I told her I had been hurt. I told her I had been disappointed. I told her I had been quiet for too long. But hate was not part of the story, not anymore. She nodded again, as if that answer mattered more than I realized. Before I left, I hugged her. She smelled like sunscreen and summer air. She whispered that she loved me, and that she was glad I was still part of her family. I told her I loved her too, and that nothing she ever did could change that. Driving home, I thought about the question my brother-in-law had asked me months earlier in the Minutes grocery store, when he said he hoped things would settle soon. Back then, the comment made me uneasy. Now, I understood what settling looked like. It was not reconciliation. It was not a confrontation. It was simply a rearrangement of roles, a shift from orbiting someone to standing firmly on your own ground. Celeste was not banned from my life. She was not punished. She was simply no longer the center. And that, more than anything, was the true closing of the chapter. 1 week later, she texted me, a short message. She said she knew things would never be the same, but hoped someday we could talk. She asked if I still had the photo book. I stared at the message for several minutes before replying. I told her yes. She asked if she could see it again someday. I said perhaps, not to be cruel, not to hold power. But perhaps was the only honest answer. Healing does not follow a schedule, and truth does not bend for convenience. Months earlier, I might have analyzed her wording, measured her motives, searched for hidden angles. Now I simply read her message and set the phone down. Some things do not require interpretation. That evening, I stood in front of the photo hanging on my wall again. The late sunlight cast warm shadows across the frame. I touched the edge lightly and felt something inside me settle. For the first time in years, I felt connected to my own story instead of drifting inside someone else's performance. Family is not a stage. It is not a competition. It is not a curated gallery where you erase the faces that do not fit the aesthetic. It is not a marketing strategy. It is not an asset to leverage or a narrative to control. Family is the truth. Messy truth. Uncomfortable truth. Imperfect truth. The kind that cannot be thrown away with a flick of a wrist. I turned off the living room lights and let the room fall into evening quiet. The picture remained visible in the dimness, as if lit from within. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this. Silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from.